it that the Kenyan workplace, the Kenyan work environment has, you know, this sort of punitive regime going on?
Yeah. Okay, well, now maybe I can begin by saying that right now I'm running my own organization.
All right.
And I started the mental health organization based on my own experience because I suffer from depression and anxiety disorder. It's been there since 2015.
Right.
But one of the things that I can say, I was in a very high pressure organization. It was an American firm. We were selling IT products. Our targets were in millions of dollars, you know, and the environment was like just crazy. And then what happened was that after I now felt sick and seeing, I feel for me, I was kind of lucky to be in an environment where my managers started kind of understanding and giving me that kind of leeway. And you can imagine this was all the way in 2015. People, mental health was not such a big thing. But yeah, I guess for me, what I can say in terms of experience in our workplace, I must say it was, I saw management trying their best to do what they can for me.
Right.
But then the unfortunate thing is, now it was the employees.
Who were not supportive.
Who were not supportive, right. And there were stories and all that stuff. So I think it's workplace, getting workplace and mental health together is, I believe, can be quite the task, you know, because you're dealing with different individuals. But basically, me speaking from my own experience, I did have very good employers.
Right.
They gave me time off. I was out for 10 months.
Right.
Yeah, and I went back to work. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to. But when I talk about workplace, and I think that's why even I was called in for this interview, it's because for me, I had a very good experience
of course.
From management, which is now the people who I want to speak to and tell them, look, you need to do this for your staff, right? And then now we deal with the other dynamics of the people,
Yes, a lot of Kenyans watching this, and there's, of course, this notion that goes around of how it's really important, or of how there are perks when you're working with multinationals or, you know, companies that are run by people who are not necessarily Kenyan. Do you feel like this maybe had a tangent to your personal experience? Yes,
it definitely did, and also because of the policies that they put into place.
Of course.
So medical leave was a whole year. So that's basically what was happening. Like medical leave was a whole year. So as you're saying, that thing of like having some of these international companies definitely plays a very big role.
Right.
I've also interacted with people who have just worked for just Kenyan companies.
Right.
And even as recently as maybe 2 weeks ago, I have a friend who got fired because of having anxiety.
Right.
Yes, and she explained to the HR, she explained to her manager that I suffer from this thing, but then they just said, we can't work with you, and they let her go. Right. So I think there's a lot of education that needs to be done in the workplace, because it's one of the main sources of stress to everyone, you know?
Right.
I mean, if you talk to people, they're like, work is so hard, work is so stressful, work is this, so that.
Yes.
And then I think also, sometimes I think about it and I'm like, and maybe you can help us with this, like how to find that kind of like balance.
Right.
Sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Now, maybe before maybe we continue the interview.
Right.
One of the things that, as I mentioned, the depression and the anxiety, so it also affects your cognitive functions to some extent, especially depending on when you got diagnosed.
Right.
So there are times I'll hang. Like I'll be
for a few minutes and it's just happening.
No, and it won't come back. Like I'll have to be like, what was I saying? You know? So those are some of the things like I like speaking to people about. And initially when I started doing interviews, I used to get so embarrassed and I'm like, this thing is happening.
Anxiety comes in.
Then I reached a point I was like, no. People need to actually see the actual thing of how this thing actually happens. So during the interview, if you see me hanging.
Yes, of course, I'll come
through. Please,
I'll come
just
for you.
Yes.
Of course, and now I have to throw it to Paul.